The galaxy had a name for humans. They called them the polite giants. No one knew exactly why humans were so calm. No one understood why they smiled when insulted. No one could explain why they apologized even when they were not wrong. The galaxy had seen many species rise and fall. Some were warriors, some were traders, some were builders, but humans were different. Humans were nice. Ambassador stood at the center of the Galactic Assembly Hall. Around him, representatives from 47 different species watched with curious eyes. Some had scales, some had fur. Some had no bodies at all, just floating lights that spoke through machines, looked small among them. He was just a man in a simple gray suit. His black hair was neatly combed. His face showed no anger, no fear, no pride, just a soft, patient smile. "The Empire has attacked 3 more human colonies," said the assembly speaker. The speaker was a tall creature with blue skin and 6 arms. "What does Earth wish to do?" Bowed his head slightly. "We wish to talk," he said. "We believe they had reasons for their actions. Perhaps we did something to offend them. We would like to understand." A sound like laughter came from the section. Their ambassador was a massive being covered in black armor. His name was, and he had led many of the attacks himself before becoming a diplomat. To him, diplomacy was just war with more words. "Understand," said. "There is nothing to understand. Your colonies were weak. We took what we wanted. That is the way of the strong." Nodded slowly. "I see. Then perhaps we can offer you something better through trade. There is no need for violence when both sides can benefit." More laughter from the other species shifted uncomfortably. They had seen this before. Humans always talked. Humans always offered peace, and they always took more. Commander watched the exchange from a viewing room high above the assembly floor. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and short hair. Her uniform was dark blue with no medals, no decorations. She had served Earth's fleet for 20 years, but you would never know it by looking at her. "He is too soft," said a voice beside her. Turned to see Admiral Minu. He was an older man with gray at his temples and deep lines on his face. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright and alert. "He is doing what he must," replied. "They killed 800 people last month, children, families. They burned the colony on 7 to the ground." Minu's voice was steady but could hear the anger beneath it. "And we send them flowers and kind words." Looked back at the assembly floor. Was still talking, still smiling, still bowing. They were still laughing. "The galaxy thinks we are weak," Minu continued. "They think we are afraid. Even our allies wonder why we do not fight back." "Let them wonder," said quietly. Minu looked at her. "You sound like the old council." Because the old council was right, turned to face him fully. "The galaxy is young, Admiral. These species have been traveling the stars for maybe 10,000 years, 20,000 at most. They fight because fighting is all they know. But Earth remembers longer times. We remember what happens when we stop being polite." Down in the assembly finished his speech. He proposed a peace summit. He offered humanitarian aid to worlds that were struggling. He suggested cultural exchanges. They did not even bother to respond. They simply stood up and walked out. The other species watched them go. Then they looked at, some felt pity, some felt confusion, a few felt something else, something like fear, because they had heard the old stories. Long ago, before humans joined the galactic community, there were whispers. Ships that had wandered too close to Earth had disappeared. Probes that had scanned human space had stopped transmitting. And there were rumors of a war that humans had fought among themselves. A war so terrible that they had sworn never to fight that way again. But those were just rumors, just old stories told by species who were now extinct. Left the assembly hall and walked through the long corridors of the station. Met him at the exit. "That went well," she said. Smile finally faded. For just a moment something else showed in his eyes, something cold, something ancient. "They are testing us," he said. They have been testing us for 50 years. Yes, and we have been very patient, looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were burning. Somewhere out there, families were dying. And somewhere out there, hidden in the dark spaces between stars, things were waiting. Things that humanity had built long ago. Things that had never been used against anyone except themselves. How much longer? Asked. As long as it takes, straightened his suit and put the smile back on his face. We made a promise, Commander. After the last war, we promised we would never be monsters again. We would be kind. We would be gentle. We would give every species every chance to choose peace. And if they refuse? Did not answer, he did not need to. Back on Earth, in a room that officially did not exist, Admiral Menu stood before a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different star system. Each system contained something hidden. Weapons, ships, machines, all of them sleeping, all of them waiting. Menu touched one of the screens. It showed a large planet covered in red clouds and black oceans. Around it, the fleet gathered like insects around a hive. 50 years, Menu said to himself. 50 years of patience. 50 years of smiling while they kill our people. He pressed a button. Nothing visible happened. But deep in space, in the cold darkness between stars, something stirred. Something woke up just a little, just enough to remember what it was made for. The galaxy called humans the polite giants. They thought it was because humans were gentle. They thought it was because humans were weak. They were wrong. Humans were polite because they remembered what happened when they were not. They were polite because they had seen what they could become. They were polite because politeness was the only thing standing between the galaxy and something much, much worse. And somewhere in the halls of the Empire, laughed at the foolish humans and planned his next attack. He had no idea what was coming. The news came at midnight Earth time. Was in her quarters when the alarm sounded. She was out of bed and dressed in 30 seconds. By the time she reached the command center, Admiral Menu was already there. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. In 20 years of service, had never seen him shake. What happened? She asked. Menu pointed at the main screen. It showed a space station, or what was left of one. Metal twisted like broken bones. Fire burned in the vacuum where oxygen still leaked from torn walls. Bodies floated in the darkness. Thousands of them. Station Sara, Menu said. His voice was barely a whisper. They hit it 2 hours ago. No warning, no demands, they just destroyed it. Felt her heart stop. Station Sara was not a military base. It was not a research facility. It was a civilian station. Families lived there. Children went to school there. Old people retired there to watch the stars. How many? She asked. 12,000. Menu closed his eyes. 12,000 people gone. The command center was silent. Officers stood at their posts with tears on their faces. Some prayed quietly. Some stared at nothing. One young man had to leave the room because he could not stop crying. His sister had lived on Station Sara. Walked to the main screen and looked at the destruction. She looked at the bodies floating in space. She looked at the ships in the distance, already flying away, already celebrating their victory. Get me Ambassador, she said. Arrived within the hour. He had been at a diplomatic dinner when the news reached him. He still wore his formal clothes, but his face had changed. The soft smile was gone. The gentle eyes were gone. What remained was something hard, something old. Show me, he said. They showed him everything. The attack, the aftermath, the messages from survivors begging for help that would come too late. They showed him the broadcast, standing on his ship, laughing, holding a piece of Station Sara's hull like a trophy. They are animals, said in the broadcast. They do not fight, they do not resist, they simply die. This is what happens to the weak. Watched the broadcast 3 times. He did not speak. He did not move. He just watched. When it was over, he turned to Menu. Call the council. The council met in a room deep beneath Earth's surface. It was a room that most people did not know existed, a room built during the last war when humanity had nearly destroyed itself. The walls were thick enough to survive anything. The air was cold and still. 7 people sat around a round table. They were the true leaders of Earth, not politicians, not celebrities, but the ones who made the real decisions. Was among them. So was Minyu. So was, though she had never been invited before. "You know why we are here," said the oldest council member. Her name was Grandmother, though she was no one's actual grandmother. She was simply the oldest human still serving. She remembered the last war. She had fought in it. They have crossed a line. "They crossed the line 50 years ago," said another member, a man named. He was younger, angrier. "We should have stopped them then. Now 12,000 people are dead because we wanted to be nice." "We are nice because we must be," replied calmly. "You were not alive during the last war. You did not see what we did to each other. You did not see the weapons we created. If you had, you would understand why we chose peace." "Peace?" slammed his hand on the table. "What peace? They attack us, they kill us, they laugh at us, and we do nothing." "We do not do nothing," said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "We have been preparing. For 50 years we have been preparing. The question is, are we ready to stop preparing and start acting?" Silence fell over the room. Minyu pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared, a map of the galaxy with human space highlighted in blue, but there were other markers too. Red dots scattered across the map. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. "What are those?" asked. "Insurance," Minyu said. "Hidden weapons platforms, ghost fleets running on AI, planet crackers buried in asteroids, defense systems disguised as debris." He zoomed in on the 12 red dots surrounded it. "We have had ships orbiting their sun for 30 years. They never knew." Stared at the map. Why did we not use these?" "Because using them means becoming what we were," said. "Using them means admitting that we have not changed, that all our talk of peace and diplomacy was just a mask." "Maybe it was," spoke for the first time. Everyone looked at her. "Maybe peace was always just a mask. Maybe we were always monsters pretending to be kind. But if that is true, then at least we tried. At least we gave them a choice." Nodded slowly. "That is the question. Have we given them enough chances? Have we been patient long enough?" The council debated for hours. They argued, they shouted, some cried. They remembered the dead not just from Station Sara but from all the attacks over the years, the colonies that were burned, the ships that were destroyed, the people who were taken as slaves. Finally raised her hand. The room fell silent. "We will give them one more chance," she said. "One final warning. We will tell them clearly and simply what will happen if they continue. And if they do not listen," she paused. Her old eyes were sad but steady. "If they do not listen, then we will stop pretending." Stood up. "I will write the message." "No," said, "let me." Everyone looked at her. She was just a commander. She was not a diplomat. She was not a politician. But something in her eyes made them all stop. "You are kind, Ambassador," she said too. "Even now, after everything, you still want to find a way to avoid what is coming. That is why you are good at your job. But this message cannot be kind. This message needs to come from someone who knows exactly what we are capable of. Someone who has spent 20 years standing guard over sleeping weapons. Someone who knows what those weapons can do." Studied her for a long moment. Then he sat back down. "Write it," he said. Went to a terminal in the corner of the room. She sat down and began to type. The message was short. The message was simple. The message was the most terrifying thing she had ever written. When she was done, she read it aloud. "To the Empire and all who support them, stop attacking or we cease pretending to be courteous. This is Earth's last warning. There will be no others." The council listened. The council approved. The message was sent. Across the galaxy, in throne rooms and command centers, in ships and stations, Beings of all species received the message. Most did not understand. Most laughed or shrugged or deleted it. But a very few, felt something cold run through their bodies, because they had heard stories, old stories, stories about what humans were before they learned to smile. And in his palace read the message and laughed louder than anyone. "Courteous," he said, "they threaten us with courtesy." He threw the message away and ordered his fleet to prepare for the next attack. He would learn, soon everyone would learn. The warning had been sent, the choice had been given, and somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, ancient machines received new orders. The waiting was almost over. The message traveled at the speed of light through relay stations across the galaxy. Within hours, every species had received it. Within days, everyone was talking about it. In the Galactic Assembly, representatives gathered to discuss. They did not know what to make of it. Earth had always been so quiet, so gentle, so harmless. Now they were sending warnings. Now they were threatening to stop being courteous. "What does it even mean?" asked the ambassador, a small creature covered in golden feathers. "Stop being courteous. They are already courteous. Nothing will change." "Perhaps they will use harsh language," joked the representative, and several others laughed. But not everyone laughed. In the back of the hall, old species sat in silence. Species who had been traveling the stars for longer than most. Species who remembered. The ambassador was one of them. She was ancient, her skin like cracked stone, her eyes like dying stars. She had lived for 12,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall, and she had heard the old stories. "You should not laugh," she said. Her voice was soft, but somehow it carried across the entire hall. Everyone fell silent. "You young ones, you know nothing. You think the galaxy has always been like this, full of small wars and small peace. You think humans are new. You think they are weak." She slowly stood up. Her bones creaked. Her movements were painful, but her eyes were sharp. "Humans are not new," she said. "They are old, older than they let you believe. Before they joined us, before they smiled and bowed and talked of peace, they were something else, something terrible. I was young when the first human ships appeared. I remember the fear we felt. We thought they were coming to conquer us, but they did not. They put away their weapons, they hid their ships, they became kind." She paused. "We never asked why they needed to put away their weapons. We were too relieved." The hall was silent. Even the representative, a younger officer named who had replaced during the war preparations, stopped smirking. "What are you saying?" the ambassador asked. "That humans are dangerous, that we should be afraid of them." "I am saying," the ambassador replied, "that humans chose to be kind. And when someone chooses to be kind, it means they could have chosen something else." Far from the assembly, in his war room watched the debates with amusement. He had received the human warning. He had laughed at it. Now he was preparing the largest fleet in history. 2,000 ships, his general reported. "Ready to launch within the week. We will strike at their core worlds. We will burn Earth itself." Smiled, he was a warrior. He had been a warrior his entire life. He understood strength. He understood fear, and he did not fear humans. "They send warnings," he said. "They talk about courtesy. Real warriors do not warn. Real warriors do not talk. They act." He turned to his general. "We will show them what real strength looks like." On Earth stood in the hidden command center and watched the fleet gather. Thousands of ships appearing on sensors, weapons charging, engines warming. "They are not listening," Minyu said beside her. "No," agreed, "they are not." "How long until they launch?" 5 days, maybe 6. Minyu was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "Are we really going to do this? Are we really going to wake them up?" Did not answer immediately. She thought about Station Sora. She thought about the 12,000 people who had died. She thought about all the other attacks over the years, the children who had lost parents, the parents who had lost children. "We gave them a choice," she finally said. We gave them 50 years of chances. We smiled when they insulted us. We apologized when they attacked us. We sent them aid when their own people were suffering. And what did they do? She turned to face Minyu. They laughed, they took, they killed, not because they had to, not because they were afraid, just because they could. Minyu nodded slowly. I know all of that, but what we are about to do, the things we are about to unleash, we built those weapons to fight ourselves. We built them during the darkest time in human history, using them against someone else. Will make us monsters again, shook her head. We were always monsters, Admiral. We just learned to wear nicer masks. The question is not whether we are monsters. The question is whether we are the kind of monsters who let innocent people die or the kind who protect them. Across the galaxy, the message continued to spread, and slowly something strange began to happen. Old records were being accessed. Archives that had been sealed for centuries were being opened. Species that had been traveling the stars before humans even existed began to share what they knew. A historian found a report from 10,000 years ago, a survey of a small blue planet in an unremarkable system. The report noted primitive life forms, potential for development, nothing special. A scientist found another report from 5,000 years later, the same planet, but something had changed. The life forms were no longer primitive. They had built cities. They had split the atom. They had touched their moon. And then nothing. The record stopped. For 2,000 years, no one had visited that system. No one had surveyed that planet. No one had wanted to go near it. When surveys resumed, the humans were waiting. They were smiling. They were polite. They welcomed the galaxy with open arms and kind words. But what had happened during those 2,000 years of silence? The ambassador knew, or at least she suspected. Her grandmother had been part of the first contact team. Her grandmother had looked into human eyes and seen something that had haunted her for the rest of her long, long life. They were not smiling then, her grandmother had told her. They were not kind, they were broken, wounded. They looked at us like we were prey, like we were meat, and then something changed. Something in their eyes shifted. They put down their weapons, they held out their hands, and they chose to be different. Now, sitting in her quarters on the assembly station, the old ambassador watched the fleet prepare for war. She watched the other species laugh and dismiss the human warning. She watched the young ones make jokes about courtesy. And she began to pray. Not for the humans, not for the... She prayed for the galaxy. Because she had seen what was hidden in human eyes, behind the smiles, behind the kindness, behind 50 years of patience and peace. She had seen what was waiting. And she knew that, when humans stopped pretending to be courteous, the galaxy would finally learn why they had started pretending in the first place. On Earth, in the room that did not exist, grandmother sat alone. She was looking at a photograph. It was old, hundreds of years old. It showed a city, or what had been a city. Nothing remained but ash and shadows. Shadows burned into stone, the shape of people who had been standing there when the light came. Her city, her home, her family. She had been away when it happened. She had survived. She had lived long enough to see humanity rise from the ashes. She had lived long enough to see them choose peace. And now she would live long enough to see what happened when peace failed. A tear rolled down her ancient cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the shadows in the photograph. "We tried, we really tried." Then she dried her eyes, stood up, and went to give the final order. The warning had been sent. The answer had been given. Now it was time to show the galaxy what courtesy had been holding back. The fleet launched on a Tuesday. 2,000 warships, the largest fleet in history. They moved through space like a wave of death, dark and unstoppable. At their head was himself, standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars pass by. "How long until we reach human space?" he asked. 6 hours, his navigator replied. "We will arrive at their border station first, then we push through to Earth." Smiled. This was what he lived for: battle, victory, the smell of burning metal and the sound of enemies screaming. Humans did not scream, he had noticed. They just died quietly like animals. That made the killing less fun, but the conquest would still be sweet. "Sir," a young officer spoke up, "we are receiving strange readings." "What kind of readings?" I am not sure. There appears to be something ahead of us, but our sensors say there is nothing there." Walked to the sensor station and looked at the screen. The officer was right. There was something, a shadow, a flicker, a ghost in the data, but when he focused on it, it disappeared. Sensor malfunction, decided. Ignore it. They continued forward. On Earth, in the command center, watched the fleet approach. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. Beside her, Minu stood with his arms crossed, his eyes dark. "They are in range," an officer reported. Nodded. "Send the activation signal." The signal traveled faster than light, bouncing through hidden relay stations that the galaxy did not know existed. It reached places that were not on any map, places that had been hidden for centuries, places where ancient things slept. And those things woke up. Was giving a speech to his crew when the first ship died. One moment it was there, a heavy cruiser 400 meters long carrying 1,000 warriors. The next moment it was gone, not destroyed, not damaged, just gone, as if it had never existed. What started? Then another ship vanished, and another, and another. Alarms screamed across the fleet. Officers shouted in confusion. Sensors went wild, showing impossible readings, ships appearing from nowhere, weapons that physics, energy signatures that should not exist. "Where are they?" roared. "Find them, show me the enemy." "Sir, I cannot," the sensor officer's voice choked off. His screen was filled with red dots, thousands of them. They had appeared from nothing, surrounding the fleet like wolves around prey. Human ships, but not like any human ships they had ever seen. These were different. These were wrong. They were black as space itself, with no lights, no windows, no signs of life. They moved without engines. They attacked without warning. And they were not alone. Behind them, larger shapes emerged from the darkness, machines the size of moons, weapons platforms that had been hiding as asteroids, AI-controlled drones that swarmed like insects, all of them waking up, all of them hungry. "Open fire," screamed. All ships opened fire. The fleet fired everything they had: missiles, lasers, plasma bombs, kinetic rounds. The darkness of space lit up with weapons fire. Nothing helped. The human weapons were faster, smarter, deadlier. They did not just destroy ships, they erased them. They did not just kill crews, they vaporized them before they could even scream. In 30 minutes, they lost 500 ships. In an hour, they lost 1,000 more. Watched his fleet die around him. He watched warriors he had known for decades disappear in flashes of light. He watched his flagship shake as human weapons tore through its shields like paper. "Retreat," he finally ordered. The word tasted like poison in his mouth. "All ships retreat." But there was nowhere to retreat to. The humans had surrounded them. The humans had cut off every escape route. The humans were not just winning, they were hunting. On the bridge of the human command ship, watched the battle with cold eyes. There was no joy in her face, no satisfaction, just duty. "Admiral," an officer reported, "the flagship is attempting to send a surrender signal." "Block it," said. "Ma'am." "I said block it. They do not get to surrender, not yet." She walked to the main screen and watched ship burn. She thought about Station Sora. She thought about the 12,000 people who had died. She thought about all the other attacks over the years. "Send him a message," she said. "Let him hear it before the end." The message was simple. It was the same message they had sent before, the same warning that had laughed at. "Stop attacking or we cease pretending to be courteous. This is Earth's last warning. There will be no others." heard the message as his ship fell apart around him. He heard it as his crew died screaming. He heard it as fire consumed everything he had ever built. And for the first time in his life, he understood. The humans had never been weak. The humans had never been afraid. The humans had been holding back something so terrible, so powerful, so unstoppable that they had chosen to suffer decades of attacks rather than use it. But now they had stopped holding back. The last thing saw was a human face on his broken screen, a woman with short hair and cold eyes. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She just looked at him with something that might have been pity. Then everything went white. The generals watched in horror as their fleet was destroyed. They watched 2,000 ships become debris in less than 3 hours. They watched the greatest military force in their history become nothing. And then the message came. It appeared on every screen, every communication device, every ship and station and building in the Empire, a simple message with simple coordinates. "Look up," it said. They looked up and they saw them. 12 ships, massive ships, ships that had been orbiting their sun for 30 years without being detected, ships that carried weapons capable of turning their entire planet into ash. The ships did nothing, they just waited, watched, let the sea them. Then came the second message. "We have been here for 3 decades. We watched your children grow up. We watched your cities expand. We watched you live your lives not knowing that we could have ended all of it at any moment, but we did not, because we chose to be courteous, because we hoped you would choose peace." A pause. "You did not. Remember this. Remember what courtesy was protecting you from, and pray that we choose to be courteous again." The ships disappeared. One moment they were there, 12 mountains of death floating in the sky. The next moment they were gone, invisible again, hidden again, waiting again. On Earth turned off the screen. The battle was over. The fleet was destroyed. The Empire had seen what humanity was capable of. Minyu stood beside her in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "How do you feel?" Thought about the question. She thought about the ships burning. She thought about the warriors dying. She thought about everything they had done. "I feel like a monster," she said honestly. "You saved lives. You ended a war. I killed thousands of people. They killed our people first. That does not make it right." Turned away from the screen. "That is why we hid these weapons, Admiral. That is why we chose to be polite, because using them, even when we have to, even when it is justified, it changes us. It reminds us of what we really are." Minyu was quiet for a long moment. Then he put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure we never have to do it again," he said. "We go back to being polite. We go back to smiling. And we hope the galaxy has learned its lesson." Nodded, but deep inside she knew the truth. They would never truly go back. The galaxy had seen them now. The mask had slipped, and everyone would remember what they had seen. Humanity would smile again. Humanity would be kind again, but the fear would remain. And perhaps that was for the best. Silence fell across the galaxy. For 3 days no one spoke. No messages were sent. No broadcasts were made. Every species, every empire, every individual simply sat with what they had seen. The destruction of the fleet. The reveal of humanity's hidden weapons. The truth that had been hiding behind 50 years of smiles. On the 4th day, the Galactic Assembly called an emergency meeting. The hall was full, but it was quiet. No one joked. No one argued. Representatives sat in their seats with wide eyes and pale faces. Even species who had no faces looked different, smaller somehow, humbled. Ambassador entered the hall alone. He wore the same simple gray suit. His black hair was neatly combed. His face showed no anger, no pride, no satisfaction, just that same soft, patient smile. But now everyone knew what that smile was hiding. The assembly speaker cleared his throat 3 times before he could speak. "Ambassador, on behalf of the Galactic Assembly, we We wish to express. He stopped. He did not know what to express. Congratulations, fear, apology. Walked to the center of the floor and bowed slightly. Thank you for receiving me, he said, his voice warm and gentle. I understand there are questions. I'm happy to answer what I can. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the ambassador raised a trembling wing. The weapons, she said, the ships that appeared from nowhere, the machines, where? Where did they come from? They were built long ago, said simply. During a time when we were different, a time when we fought ourselves. We call it the last war. It nearly destroyed us. When it ended, we made a choice. We could continue being what we were, destroyers, conquerors, killers, or we could try to be something better. He paused. We chose to be better. We hid our weapons. We taught ourselves to be kind. And we joined the galactic community, hoping that kindness would be enough. But you kept the weapons, the representative said. His voice was accusing, but there was fear underneath it. You lied to us. You pretended to be harmless while you had those things. We did not lie, replied. We simply did not speak of things that we hoped would never be needed. We did not want to be feared. We wanted to be friends. His smile faded slightly. But friendship requires both sides to try. We tried for 50 years. They did not. Silence again. Then the ambassador slowly rose from her seat. Everyone turned to look at her, the oldest being in the room, the one who had tried to warn them all. I have a question, she said, her ancient voice steady. Now that we have seen what you are capable of, what happens next? Will you conquer us? Will you rule the galaxy with fear? Looked at her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he laughed. It was a warm laugh, a genuine laugh. No, he said, we have no interest in conquest. We never did. If we wanted to rule the galaxy, we would have done it long ago. What we want is what we have always wanted: peace, trade, friendship. We want to share knowledge and culture. We want to learn from you and teach you what we know. We want to build something beautiful together. But the weapons will go back to sleep. The ships will hide again. The machines will rest. Smile returned, but now there was sadness in it. We did not want to use them. We hated using them. Every life we took weighs on us, but we had no choice. They would not stop. We gave them every chance. We gave them more chances than they deserved. And when they chose war, we had to show them why that was a mistake. He looked around the hall at all the frightened faces. We will be kind again, he said. We will be courteous again. We will smile and bow and talk of peace. And I truly hope, that none of you ever give us a reason to stop. 1 week later, sat in a small office on Earth filling out paperwork. Her desk was covered with forms and reports. Her coffee was cold. Her eyes were tired. The door opened, and Admiral Minu walked in. The Empire has sent a formal surrender, he said. They are asking for peace terms. Did not look up from her paperwork. What are we asking for? Nothing. Now she looked up. Nothing. The council decided. Minu sat down across from her. We are not taking territory. We are not demanding payment. We are not punishing them. We are simply going to act as if the last 50 years never happened. Fresh start. They killed 12,000 people on Station Sora. I know. They burned colonies. They took slaves. They laughed at our dead. I know. Set down her pen. Then why are we letting them off so easily? Minu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because if we punish them, we become what they said we were: conquerors, tyrants, masters using strength to crush the weak. We did not fight to become that. We fought to stop the killing. The killing has stopped. Now we go back to being who we chose to be. Stared at him, then slowly she nodded. It is not fair, she said. No, but it is right. He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. The council also wanted me to tell you something. The battle at the fleet, it is being filed as a minor border dispute. Officially, nothing happened. There was a small conflict, some ships were damaged, and both sides agreed to peaceful resolution. Almost laughed. A minor border dispute. We destroyed 2,000 ships. And the galaxy does not need to remember that forever. They saw what they needed to see. They learned what they needed to learn. Now we let them forget, just enough to stop being afraid, just enough to see us as friends again. After he left, sat alone in her office for a long time. She thought about everything that had happened, the attacks, the warning, the battle, the silence that followed. Then she picked up her pen and went back to her paperwork. Just a commander doing her job, just a human being human. On the Galactic Assembly Station, met with diplomats from a dozen species. They were nervous around him now. Their smiles were too wide. Their laughs were too quick. They treated him like a bomb that might explode at any moment. He understood. It would take time, but time was something humans had learned to use well. "I believe we were discussing trade routes," he said pleasantly. "They had concerns about tariffs, I think." The ambassador jumped slightly at being addressed. Yes, the tariffs. We would be happy to negotiate, whatever terms Earth finds acceptable." "Whatever terms," raised an eyebrow. "That does not sound like negotiation, that sounds like surrender." The went pale. "I did not mean we are not trying to." Held up a hand. "I am joking. Please relax. I am still the same person I was before. Earth is still the same. We have no interest in unfair deals or forced agreements. We want partnerships that benefit everyone." Slowly, very slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. And that was how it went, day by day, meeting by meeting, smile by smile. Humanity put the mask back on. Humanity became courteous again. The weapons went back to sleep. The ships hid again. The machines rested. But nothing was quite the same. In corners and quiet rooms, species whispered to each other. They told stories about what they had seen. They warned their children to always be polite to humans. They looked at the smiling ambassadors and kind traders, and they wondered what was hiding behind those gentle eyes. Fear remained, not loud, not obvious, but there, a quiet understanding that had spread across the galaxy. Humans were kind because they chose to be. And choosing meant they could always choose differently. Years later, a young officer asked his grandfather what the war had been like. The old warrior, who had been there when the fleet burned, looked at his grandchild with haunted eyes. "Never forget," he said. "When a human smiles at you, smile back. When a human offers peace, take it. When a human gives you a warning, listen." "But why, grandfather? They seem so harmless." The old warrior shook his head slowly. "That is what the universe thought," he said. "That is what we all thought, and we were wrong. So terribly, terribly wrong." He looked up at the sky, where stars twinkled peacefully, where human ships traveled between worlds, where ancient weapons slept in the darkness. "The polite ones are always the most dangerous," he whispered, "because they have something to be polite about." Somewhere on a small blue planet, a human smiled. And the galaxy remembered to smile back.